Welcome, supporters and fans of effective fitness training. Today we have Toma Platze for you. Thank you very much for accepting our interview.
It's my pleasure, Martin. It's my honor and pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Platze, first question. Do you remember some time ago when you first realized that you will be the Toma Platze today, the legend for us, the bodybuilder, you know, the inspiration?
Sure. I was 9 years old.
9 years old.
I was a small boy. And I looked at a picture in a DM, a drugstore.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And there's magazines, a magazine rack. I looked at the picture of Dave Draper. Dave Draper was the Arnold before Arnold.
Yeah.
Blonde hair, and a girl on this arm, and a girl on that arm, and a girl on this leg. Pictures of surfboard,
Yeah.
the ocean in the back, and the beach. And I looked at my dad and I said, Dad, when I grow up, that's what I want to do, okay? And he's like, oh, give me the magazine, we're gonna go. But I never forgot. And those pictures emotionalized me and gave me so much energy. And I'm like, wow, people do that. There's guys that lift weights, you know, and there's the next page, Arnold drinking protein out of the blender with Frank Zane. And I'm like, I'm a 9-year-old child going, this is what I want to do. Okay, I was convinced. And there was, I think really your career chooses you. You don't choose your career. Everyone thinks we choose what we want to do.
Yeah.
I think we have it backwards. I think we're attracted to do something we really have no choice in. We develop this passion, and we realize that this is our destiny. If you really listen and still yourself, and be very still, and it's hard to do nowadays with Instagram and Facebook and instant messenger and you know. But if you can really still yourself and be quiet, you know what to do. And even if it's the wrong choice, even if it's the wrong choice in the big scheme of things, you get another chance and you're able to figure it out and start over again.
So it is just part of the way.
Yeah, I believe so. But that was what really was causative in my life. And I met the photographer. His name was Artie Zeller. When I came to California years after that, and Artie Zeller remembered taking the picture, and I told Artie Zeller, I said, this picture, as a 9-year-old child, changed my life forever. And I want to thank you for that. Your art changed my life, his art of photography, and which brought me to California and really started my bodybuilding life. I mean, I was training much before that, of course, but as a 9-year-old child and a 10-year-old child, 11-year-old child, I already knew I could do this. I don't think I really have the talent for it.
At what age you went to California?
I was about 19, 20 years old, somewhere in there. I graduated from college.
Yeah.
My dad, when I was a 9-year-old child, my dad said, first you go to college, get your degrees, then you can go do whatever you want. And I had $50 and a plane ticket, and I went to California. Okay, I would live with 25 people, 15 guys, 10 girls.
Bodybuilders or?
No. Maybe two or three, but in one room. And it didn't matter. I had no money, and I had to eat my tuna fish and my eggs. And tomorrow morning, I'm training Gold's Gym. And that was the most important thing in my life. But I knew this is what I was supposed to do. I mean, I was so convinced nobody could tell me otherwise. If they did, thank you, bye.
Yeah,
okay?
Of course.
And I think that's really how I started and what I remember about when you asked me that question. And I can tell you a lot about as things developed, but I can remember it so vividly, sitting on a newsstand and reading that muscle magazine and being so enthralled and so motivated, and thinking, as a small child, you have kids at school that bully you, and you want to gain identity and be powerful, and so as a 9-year-old child, I became the guy that lifted weights. Oh, he lifts weights. Oh, wow, he's special. But nobody lifted weights. Fitness, nobody went to the gym. And if you did, you were really weird. Now everybody goes.
Yeah, of course.
But as time went on, it was less, being bullied. It was more of my art. And And I never tried to please the judges. Everyone nowadays trying to please the judges, you know? Okay, what do they want? Let me ask them questions. Maybe I'm not doing something right. Forget about pleasing the judges. Your art, and as I tell people, you should express yourself from within and humbly show the judges and the audience how it goes according to you. So when I walked on stage, I had this belief system and this confidence. It wasn't trying to, you know, please this judge or that judge. I just wanted to tell the audience. And
I know.
The girls taught me that.
Yeah.
I didn't teach them. But it's funny how that happened. And I tell you the truth, I really didn't have the talent to be a bodybuilder. I had the talent to be a powerlifter, strong. But I wanted to be a bodybuilder because you win a powerlifting contest and you get a pat on the back and a beer mug and you go home. Or you put the trophy on your mantle. But you win a bodybuilding contest. Oh my God, Joe Weider's inviting you to California and a Weider contract in Hollywood. And I'm like, so I sold out to strength training, and I believed, you know, strength training was really what I was made to be, but I wanted to be a bodybuilder. I wanted to do what Arnold did. I wanted to do what Dave Draper did. I wanted to do what Frank Zane did. And they were all very helpful in teaching me as a young man how to do this.
What was your greatest failure in your eyes? Not judges, not people, and how you overcame it? And was it some lesson for you, or you know what I mean?
Oh, you learn about life on stage and in the gym. The gym is where I learned about life. The stage was very informative to me. I loved going on stage and posing. I would train 25 more years for one more night. Funny you should ask that. I mean, in 81, I was the best I ever was. I could open the door to the gym. Boom! My arms grew. It was perfect. There was nothing that I did in the gym that didn't work. It was one of those years like, wow, this is so cool. You know, do calf raises, boom! Do squats, boom! Striations and veins. I'm like, I was like scaring myself in the mirror. I'm like, wow, you know. A lot of reasons that happened that year, but I was in the right mindset. And I was a pro for 3 years in a row. This is my third year as a pro in 1981. I became a pro in 1979, first Olympia 1980, my second Olympia 1981. Now I'm here to do business. And to answer your question, I lost that show. I did not win the Mr. Olympia. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I established a career from losing. My whole career. And to this day, that's 37 years ago, or 30, 60, whatever it was, I have a career and I'm still touring the world doing seminars talking about bodybuilding that we all love, from losing. And so really,
crazy.
If you're totally spent, if you give of yourself completely, and you go to the gym and you will not refuse to leave a loser, and you go on stage and have confidence because you did this and you want to show people how it goes according to you, you can't lose. So even though I did not win the Olympia, and I don't have the trophy, I have everything else there could be. Bodybuilding's been good physically, mentally, spiritually, financially. I'm still working after all these years. I'm 63 years old, and I'm still working based upon what I did as a 23-year-old.
And thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, the audience, the fans, give me the energy. I always say that. I just, it was a matter. I was talking to the audience as one person, and they put me there. They put me there, and you guys all put me there, and I'll never forget that. Okay? And I want to give back. Now, that's why I'm still active. I left for a while. I decided to leave bodybuilding. Thought to myself, that's the old days. It was my younger years. But I got into business, and the same energy that I put into the gym, I go, it must work in business too. It probably works in corporate world. So I went to the corporate world, and I interviewed and put a tie on, and they go, well, you don't have any experience in the corporate world. I said, I can learn. I'm trainable. Teach me. Let me show you what I can do. So I went to the office in the corporation, and I put the same attitude into the gym, into the corporate world, and they did very well. It was very good to me, and I loved it. But after about a number of years, I did some videos and some stuff on YouTube, and all of a sudden, people that were 20 years old, like yourselves, go, wow, I want to know. And I start getting invited around the world again. I'm like, so my CEO, my boss, I said, I have the opportunity to tour the world again. And I would leave for a month at a time or 3 weeks at a time. And finally he said, if you don't take advantage of going back to what you know, what you really believe in and gave you life, if you don't take this opportunity, I'm going to fire you. He was joking.
Yeah, I understand the
He
point.
goes, I want you here. He kept my name on the door. He goes, you coming back? And I called him and I went to see him and I said, I need, at this point in my life, to maintain global mobility. I need to talk to the young people and really give back the mentality and the love of the game that the bodybuilding gave me. I have to continue doing this. He goes, I totally understand and I respect what you do. And I respect your decision. His name was Dino, like Dino the dinosaur. Oh, he was sharp.
Yeah.
And when he knew I wanted to learn about business, he would say, really? I said, I don't want Arnold to give me a job. I wanted to actually interview, like, so nobody knew me, you know? He goes, I know who you are. What are you doing? You know? Okay, but
Show me a squat.
yeah. Neil, his trainer, knew me, and I'm like, what are you doing? But I just wanted to do things on my own. I wanted to learn what I did not have to learn at age 20. At age 20, I'm launched in professional bodybuilding. Arnold said to me, I'm leaving bodybuilding seminars and exhibitions. You can take my place. I said, okay, let's go. It was my opportunity. Nobody else wanted to travel. Nobody else wanted to go to Europe and go to all these countries and go on stage every 5 days. I did. We had no Facebook. We had no Instagram. So you had to go, in order to become a product and promote yourself as a product, I had to go on stage every 5 days, which is hard. Most guys, most pros that I train now, they're horrified at the idea of traveling this much. But I was blessed because I was not an ectomorph, I was a mesomorph. I could train with less frequency, not train that often, and train with more intensity. I could leave for the weekend and come back home bigger, fuller, and stronger. Okay,
Right.
in Europe 3 or 4 months out of the year, I got bigger and stronger by not training as much. So my life is...
I would love that.
You know, your career chooses you. I mean, it really does. And bodybuilding has been everything I wanted it to be. Although I don't have the Sandow. I had a trophy cabinet made for the Sandow. And, you know, and sometimes I wish I could have won that Sandow. And I said to myself when I was competing in 10 Mr. Olympians, I said, if I don't win this contest, I'm going to die trying. And I did give it that much. But I would not trade what I do have and the career I do have for the Sandow. The Sandow should give you the career that I've had.
The purpose is the main thing. Yeah.
I mean, every judge who judged the Mr. Olympia that year, I went to their country each 4 or 5 times. They said, we'll pay you any money you want. Just put Ride Like the Wind on, Christopher Cross, and do the leg shots, and just how much money you need? Fine, money, that's no problem, okay? And so, you know, I made a very good living. It was very good to me, and I was like, wow, this is, you feel like a rock star, you know? Those were the old days, and I don't want to live in the old days. I want to live in the modern day. But I really feel that all those days, people say to me, weren't those days great days, you know, the 80s? And really, those days, I was training for my career as far as what I do now. What I do now is much more important. When you have a career that is useful to other people, okay? When your career means something to other people, that's the best thing. So for really, the 80s and competing in Olympia 10 times was just training for what I do now.
Yeah.
This is the most important part of my career, okay? And I say that with all sincerity. And I'm thrilled and honored to still be working in the business. And I'm grateful to be working this many years. But like I say, I think your career chooses you. Now, we're all chosen for something. We all have a great talent. And that we're supposed to see and realize and fulfill. And one of the things that I think about a lot nowadays, I want to share this with you, that people say to me, even the top pros, oh, I sacrificed my whole life to win the big contest. I gave up my social life. I didn't have any girlfriends. They eat 6-10 times a day and they live in an apartment and they train. They don't talk to anybody. I'm like, I would never want to do that. I mean, bodybuilding training should be make your life better. It should not be your life completely, okay? And when I went into professional bodybuilding, I gained social life. I gained, you know, girlfriends and people and friends and camaraderie around the world. I mean, I never gave up anything. The gym and being a professional bodybuilder gave me a bigger life. So really, it's not bodybuilding and fitness is not about pain and punishment and deprivation. Fitness is about abundance and prosperity in the gym and outside the gym.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's really probably one of my most important messages that I would want to relate to you right now.
Perfect.
It gives you everything. I mean, you know, and I've had a lot of material wealth from the gym, from the sport, but it's not about how much stuff. I have to honestly say to you, at one time when I was competing in all those Mr. Olympias and making all that money, I'm thinking, I thought that's the goal. Make as much money as you can to have all this stuff, you know, BMWs, a house on the one coast and a house on another coast, on the water. But when you have the most stuff, you're not the most happiest, as I am now. Okay? And I really think that money is useful. It comes and goes. Money comes and money goes. Okay? But the way you affect other people, that lasts forever. And that's really my mantra right now.
Perfect.
Okay? Perfect. But, you know, and I'm the messenger, okay? I'm not the message. I mean, God gave me this position in life to be a messenger. And I'm standing on the shoulders of many great men and women before me. I mean, there's some great women that taught me how to pose. They taught me this. And some of the old girls would say, I like that thing you do with your hair. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're like, how you do this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they taught me. In the leg shot, I remember posing in the UK.
Yeah.
I was guest posing. I had a sweatsuit on prior to going on stage. And I had like lint from the sweatsuit. I had oil on my skin. So I saw this, I was on stage, I go, oh my God, there's lint on my Yeah. So I started doing that.
That's great.
And people liked it, so it became part of my, every time I went on stage.
So this is how it started?
That's how it started.
Crazy.
Everything was by accident, but then again, I don't believe that accidents really happen. I believe accidents are really conditions in life, or situations in life, or circumstances in life, which are supposed to happen. You're supposed to learn from and rise above or utilize in some way.
Yes.
Even when you injure yourself, I think we're causative in that. When I was injured in 81 or 82, my bicep tore, the more I think about those years, I'm thinking, I was doing so much, stressed out, I needed to relax somehow, and my body gave out, okay? But I think, really, we're in control of a lot of this, and I think if you're following your destiny with God, and you're following your talent, you have to be careful. You know, too much of anything is abusive. And the condition of the current sport, there's so much risk involved in bodybuilding.
Yes.
There's too much risk. I mean, I believe you have to take a risk to be successful. There's an inherent risk in any success venture. But, you know, you don't commit suicide. When you go to the squat rack and you put 500 pounds on, you're doing reps. The idea is not to commit suicide. The idea is to, you know, to establish a certain amount of risk, but it's below the anticipated outcome. If the risk is real high and the success is here, the outcome assessment is here, it's too much risk. And I think many bodybuilders who talk to me, they say, I blew my intestines out squatting. I'm like, what? Well, you're squatting too heavy, you're crazy. You know, too much too soon. But I think it's supposed to be, bodybuilding and fitness is supposed to be physical culturism. It's supposed to give life, and it's supposed to be about feeling better, and about living a full, rich life. I don't mean in money. Money doesn't make a rich person. Money has nothing to do with being rich.
Giving is what makes you rich.
When you give to somebody, when I talk to an audience, I used to pose, and of course I retired. When I give a seminar, I give motivation, and I work with some young people coming up, men and women, and I share some of my experiences, and I don't want credit for that. I want to see them succeed and go, I had something to pass on. And when it's over, I mean, I'm 63, I figure, okay, maybe I'll be hanging around in this business for 10, 15 years more. But you want to hope you want to hope, and I hope that this bodybuilding, this fitness lifestyle that's given so much to me, before I leave and go to the next life, as I see it, you hope you made a positive dent, and maybe you left it a little bit better than when you found it. That's the most important thing to me, and that's my goal, or my concept about doing what I do now. People say, why are you traveling around the world still? Because I can. Because it's like adding plates to the bar. You can.
Yeah.
And I think it's the right thing to do. As I listen and still myself in the morning and listen to that voice inside. I'm supposed to be in the Czech Republic now. I'm supposed to be in many, many countries. And I believe you have to approach things with no fear. Yeah. And confidence comes from within, but it's not something you make up. If you're doing what you want to do and expressing yourself and living the life you want to live, because someday it's going to be your last day. Someday this on earth, it's going to be your last day you lived. So you better live life and take it as if it's your last day.
Yes.
And that's what bodybuilding is to me. And that's right now. At 63 years old, I feel like I'm 20. I wish I felt this good when I was 20. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry that I wanted to give you a.
Perfect. I'm grateful for that.
I can answer. I can talk forever. Okay. And I think that's another gift from God. I mean, He gave me the gift of squatting and the ability to train and the mentality. But He also gave me the gift of how to express myself. And a lot of bodybuilders, they do it, and I watch them. Mm-hmm. They don't express themselves and vocalize what they feel. That's my job. I don't know why, but God gave me that. So I'm supposed to be doing this. And this is my music. Mm-hmm. As an artist, as a sculptor, as a painter, you want to express yourself and affect other people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes art motivates and inspires people, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes art disturbs people. Mm-hmm. And in my humble personal opinion, we need less physicality in bodybuilding. We need less science nowadays and more art, more human spirit. In the old days, I was taught to walk on stage and just stand there and smile and have the audience, wah, and feel your energy. Most bodybuilders, they're asking the audience for applause. Mm-hmm. And, they're not really posing. They're not conditioned to pose. In the old days, boy, we practiced posing and posing and posing. I could pose for 24 hours nonstop. Mm-hmm. That was conditioning. Nowadays, they have to let the big guys rest. Yeah. They're over 300 pounds. They're in good shape, but they can't handle this. They're 300 pounds. Yeah. Let them rest. Don't give them too much, and they really can't. I'm like, that's why everybody I think is so interested in the golden era. Mm-hmm. And we had no idea it was the golden era. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s. It was just a great time. And I think people, even you're as young as you guys are, you want to know about the golden era. You can see it on video. There wasn't much video. We didn't have video. We didn't have telephone. Yeah. Cell phones to look at video.
But you had life.
We had life.
Yeah.
I had one Super 8 reel, a movie camera.
Yeah.
And it was one reel of Sergio Oliva posing. I kept that. I could watch it if I could find a movie camera. I could watch Sergio Oliva pose.
Great.
Somebody I knew had a camera, and I got to watch him pose and learn from that. Mm-hmm. So that's why we all came to California, though, because we couldn't watch it on our cell phones. We had to come and move to California to go to the one gym, Gold's Gym, and train together. And we sacrificed everything, gave up our whole lives to wherever we were, whatever country we were in, to train together in one gym, because we knew we were supposed to train together and share these experiences. And the camaraderie was intense back then, the friendship, and going to the beach together, going to lunch together. There was no suntan, instant sprays at night. That's why the Olympia is in September, because we had to lay in the sun June, July, and August, okay?
It looked much better before, I believe.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Oh. Can I have one more question? The last one?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, there are many guys who are very passionate about bodybuilding. They are hardworking. But is there anything else you would advise those guys to fulfill their dream? I mean, of course, I mean philosophy, because you are a philosophical person. And if there is something more than passion and training from your point of view to be a champion or to express yourself honestly?
Well, nothing replaces hard work and work ethic. And it's not going to happen, in other words, it's not going to happen quickly. It's, when I was a young boy, 9 years old, I thought about, well, maybe I should be a priest. No, I'll be a bodybuilder instead. You know how much energy you would give, how much commitment, how much life commitment there would be to be a priest or a nun? Wow, I'm like, wow, that's a whole life commitment to God, right? I gave that to the squat rack.
Yeah.
I gave that, I married the squat rack and the gym. This is going to be my life. I know it. I know it. Thank you, God, for showing me the squat rack. Okay? I mean that. He showed me the squat rack. I don't know what I would have done without him showing me this. He shows us all our squat rack in life.
Yeah.
Whether it be the squat rack or another type of business, like what you guys do now. But dreams do come true. Dreams absolutely do come true. They probably won't be exactly like your dream was, but they'll be a close facsimile. You have to believe that. Okay? And you cannot let anybody tell you you can't do something. You cannot let anybody tell you you can't do something, especially yourself. Because you'll get days when you go, oh, you know, I'm going to retire. Oh, I can't do this. Or I'm not good enough. Or I'm not big enough. There's always somebody bigger, faster, stronger. Mm-hmm. Always. And this is the only sport to where you're not competing with another human. Every other sport you're competing, or pretty much so, you're competing with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And anybody can figure out how to beat another human. But to challenge yourself and look in the mirror going, every morning your clients come in the gym and look in the mirror, that's the guy you got to beat. That's the woman you got to beat. And how can you better yourself every day and do more than you think you can? Wow. That's a great sport. That's, I think, why we all chose bodybuilding. It's an individual sport. It's the camaraderie. It can be a team orientation. But really, when you're alone or with your trainer in the gym in the morning or the afternoon, as the case may be, it's being your best self. Mm-hmm. Being your best self and knowing that you'll never get there. When I retired in '86, and you know, I thought, well, I could probably do more, but it's time to get out. You know, it's time to retire because there's a new generation coming up, and you have to realize I was touring the world like I am now, guest posing every day. I had a gym bag full of posing trunks, and we used cassette tapes back then. Okay, I used cassette tapes. I'm dating myself now. But I became so comfortable with doing it that I needed to find something that made me uncomfortable. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell everybody, our viewers. When you're uncomfortable is when you grow. When you're uncomfortable in the gym, oh God, that's when you grow. When you're uncomfortable in life is when you grow. So my goal in life, and the gym taught me this, is to purposefully, the mouthful, purposefully put yourself in uncomfortable situations. So I retired from the competitive bodybuilding stage. I was too comfortable. And it was all about the money now too. I'm making $5,000 every weekend. I'm like, okay, that's enough. Money is not the most important thing as I see it now. Yeah. Like right now, money's not that important at all. It's about really affecting other people. And it's not about me anymore. It's not about me gaining position. It's about giving this energy to somebody like yourself, saying, here you go, take this, okay? And I think you have to have that kind of belief system. And there's one more thing that happened in my life, which probably happens in everybody's life to some degree. I had a coach, football coach, yes, when I was young. And he kicked me in the butt. And I went rolling. I was a small kid. He said, you'll never be nothing, Platz. You'll never be nothing. I'm like, wow. I was shocked. I was like beside myself. I didn't know what to do. So I made a promise to myself when I was young. I made a promise, a self-promise, made a self-promise that I would never leave the gym of a loser, and I would give it everything I have, everything. And if I have a leg workout, if I can walk to the car easily, I haven't done enough. Okay, I made that in my mind. So I was willing to give it that much. And that's why I always say to people, there's 5 more reps. Because when you think you're done, when you think you cannot, no way do any more reps, there's 5 more. That's your cue. So, you know, that's what I personally experienced. But you have to be able to make those kind of self-promises and realize that dreams do come true, and don't let yourself or anyone else talk you out of it. Okay? You have to have that firm commitment to where you embrace that. You can do anything. If you wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, actor, politician, you could do it. I wish I had one more life. If I had one more life, maybe this time I'd be a professional golfer.
Yeah, I've heard you like it now.
But I don't have talent to be a golfer. But I didn't have talent really to be a bodybuilder.
Of course.
I didn't have this tiny waist and these big shoulders. I wasn't the ideal physique, okay? I wasn't the classical physique. I have many guys, many I see today that are much better than I ever was. But they don't have the belief system. One guy I'm working with here in Europe, and I talked to people, and he said, Tom, when I was a young boy in school, I was afraid to ask the girl to dance. I would always think, after this song, I'm gonna ask that girl to dance. After this song, I'm gonna ask that cute little blonde to dance. And he never asked the girl to dance. And his whole life went on, he never asked the girl to dance. And he told me this story, and he's a very good bodybuilder. He's about on the verge of coming into the pros. And I said, now, the Olympia is nothing. I mean, it's the Olympia, I don't mean it's nothing, but don't think about it as the Olympia is way over here. The Olympia is in here. The Olympia is inside yourself. And realize that the Olympia is nothing, and it's just as meaningful as your first show. And I said, never forget, and every day when you wake up, ask the girl to dance. Okay? And he's like, you know, he was like motivated, and you could see like his eyes were lighting up.
Because it was his fear.
Yeah.
It was stopping him from being best version of himself, right?
You know, we're going to have fear in life. It's another cue. It's another cue to embrace the heat. I was taught by my mentors and my teachers to embrace the heat, to be uncomfortable, and to conquer that and figure it out. And, you know, if you want something bad enough in life, if you really want it bad enough, you'll figure it out. And the only difference between me and everybody else in fitness, most people, is that I wanted more. I wanted it more. Okay? Certainly not talent. I mean, I didn't have the talent that most people have. But I wanted it so bad, I would give it that much. Okay? And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Perfect. Okay. As you've heard from Mr. Platz, I'm sorry. This is his story. We really want to thank you for coming here, giving us your time.
Thank you.
And I want to say one more thing. I do many seminars, but I was never nervous like today. And about 3 weeks back, I was about 3 times from that time, I was thinking about canceling this. Because first time I didn't believe you will reply, I will get you. Then I thought, well, it may be real. Wow, okay. And then it was here, and I thought yesterday, just get in the car, brother, and let's go. We have to do it for people. We have to spread your knowledge and your philosophy, because I was a philosopher. I studied philosophy, really. And that's why I love your approach, because it is much more than just showing muscles. You show the soul, you show the way, you show the purpose, and that's what is very important for me.
And that's what's missing on stage today.
Exactly.
The human spirit.
Exactly.
And everybody can win, and everybody can be extremely successful. And you cannot say, well, I'm okay, and I'm okay to, like in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. You can be world class if you want to be. If you want to be an Olympic champion, you can be an Olympic champion. It's going to take some effort, some sacrifice, and some discipline, and some bad days and some good days. It's not going to be all perfect. But if you want it, if you want anything, as I just said before, The only person stopping you is you. And you have to realize that we are causative in our life. We have a life given to us. I'm going to beat life up. I'm going to beat it to death until I die. And then it's the next life. Okay?
Perfect, perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.